My name is Samantha Miller, and at 32, I never imagined being uninvited from my own sister's wedding. The sister I grew up idolizing. The wedding I'd been helping plan for months. But life has a funny way of redirecting your path when doors slam in your face. Instead of crying in my apartment during her big day, I booked a spontaneous trip to Italy. What started as an escape from heartbreak transformed into a viral sensation that changed my life forever. Before I dive into how my sister's rejection led to the best decision I ever made, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to join me for more stories about finding joy in life's unexpected turns. Madison and I grew up thick as thieves despite our 3-year age difference. As the younger sister, I looked up to her with the kind of wide-eyed admiration that only little sisters understand. Our childhood home in Connecticut was the stage for countless imaginary weddings, with Madison always claiming the role of beautiful bride and me happily serving as her dedicated maid of honor. We'd drape our mom's lace curtains over Madison's head as a makeshift veil while I carried a bouquet of dandelions plucked from our backyard. "When I get married for real, you'll be right beside me," Madison would declare with the certainty only a child can possess. "Promise?" I'd always ask. "Pinky promise," she'd reply, linking her finger with mine. Sisters forever. Those childhood dreams followed us through high school, where Madison stood up to anyone who teased me about my braces and frizzy hair. When I struggled with calculus, she'd stay up late helping me understand derivatives and integrals despite having her own homework. The day she left for college was the first time I felt truly alone, but she called me every Sunday without fail. When my turn for college came, Madison helped me move into my dorm at Boston University, decorating my half of the room with photos of us and fairy lights to make it feel less intimidating. During my freshman year, my first serious boyfriend broke up with me right before finals. Madison drove 3 hours in a snowstorm just to bring me ice cream and tissues. She let me cry on her shoulder all night, assuring me I deserved better. "The right people stay," she told me. And I'm not going anywhere. I returned the favor when her college sweetheart cheated on her during senior year. I skipped 2 days of classes to help her pack his things and move them out of their shared apartment. We burned the love letters he'd written her in the sink of her new place, laughing through tears as the paper curled into ash. After college, our adult lives took shape with Madison pursuing marketing in New York while I built my career as a graphic designer in Boston. Despite the distance, we maintained our bond with weekly video calls and monthly visits. When Madison struggled with a demanding boss who took credit for her ideas, I helped her polish her resume and practice interview questions for a new position. When I faced a creative block during an important client project, Madison stayed on the phone with me for hours, brainstorming concepts until inspiration struck at 2 a.m. Through our 20s, we supported each other through career changes, apartment disasters, and dating mishaps. We joked about our childhood wedding games, but the promise remained unspoken between us. Whoever married first, the other would be her maid of honor. It wasn't even a question. Then Madison met Derek 2 years ago at a charity gala in Manhattan. He came from old money, worked in finance, and had the kind of confidence that commanded attention the moment he entered a room. Their relationship moved quickly. Within 6 months, they were living together in his Upper East Side apartment. I noticed subtle changes in Madison during this time. Her wardrobe shifted from creative and colorful to exclusively designer labels in neutral tones. Our phone calls became shorter, often interrupted by Derek's voice in the background. Still, when Madison called me screaming with excitement about the princess-cut diamond on her finger, my happiness for her was genuine. I cried alongside her as she described Derek's romantic rooftop proposal. "You know what this means," she said, her voice softening. "I need to officially ask you something." My heart swelled as she continued, "Samantha, will you be my maid of honor?" "As if you even need to ask," I replied, tears streaming down my face. "I've been preparing for this my entire life." The following months were a whirlwind of wedding preparations. I took time off work to accompany Madison to venue visits across New England. We spent an entire weekend creating mood boards and browsing through bridal magazines. I held her hand when she found her dream dress, a custom Vera won with delicate lace detailing that made her look like she'd stepped out of a fairy tale. When the consultant asked about bridesmaid dresses, Madison turned to me with shining eyes. "Something that makes her feel as beautiful as I do right now," she said, squeezing my hand. After 5 boutiques and dozens of dresses, I finally found the one, an elegant midnight blue gown that complemented Madison's winter wonderland theme. Standing on the pedestal with Madison tearing up behind me, I felt like everything was falling perfectly into place. The childhood promise was being fulfilled. Despite the distance that had grown between us since Derek entered the picture, planning her wedding seemed to be bringing us back to the inseparable sisters we'd always been. The first hint that something was changing came 3 months into the wedding planning. Madison had been mentioning a new colleague named Bethany who had recently joined her marketing team. Bethany came from a prominent New York family with connections to fashion magazines and luxury brands. Their friendship seemed to blossom overnight, with Madison's Instagram suddenly filled with photos of them at exclusive restaurants and invitation-only events. "Bethany knows everyone," Madison would gush during our calls. "She got us into the MoMA after-hours event. Can you believe it? We were standing next to that actress from the Netflix show everyone's watching." I was happy Madison was making new friends, especially ones who could open doors for her career. But as weeks passed, our wedding planning sessions began to include frequent mentions of Bethany's opinions. "Bethany thinks we should consider the plaza instead. Her cousin had her reception there. Bethany says these flowers are out of season. We should look at these options instead. Bethany knows this amazing calligrapher who does all the Vanderbilt family invitations." Then came the first real disappointment. Madison and I had already visited and fallen in love with a charming historic estate in Connecticut for the venue, a beautiful property with gardens that would be transformed into a winter wonderland for the December wedding. We'd put down a deposit and begun discussing decorations. Then, during one of our weekly planning calls, Madison sounded unusually hesitant. "So, about the venue," she began. "Derek's parents think it's a bit rustic. They suggested we look at the Pierre in Manhattan instead. They've offered to cover the difference in cost." "The Pierre? But what about the deposit? What about all the ideas we had for the estate?" I asked, confused by the sudden change. "I know, but this would make Derek's family happy. And honestly, it would be more convenient for most of the guests who live in the city. The Pierre has that old-world glamour that would be perfect for the photos." The mention of photos struck me as odd. The Madison I knew had always cared more about meaning than appearances. But I swallowed my disappointment and told her I'd help her make the Pierre just as special as the estate would have been. As weeks passed, Madison's social media presence underwent a dramatic transformation. Her formerly casual feed became a carefully curated showcase of luxury experiences, often featuring Bethany and other new friends I'd never met. Captions changed from personal anecdotes to vague inspirational quotes and designer tags. When I mentioned this during a call, Madison laughed it off. "Image is important in Derek's circle," she explained. "These connections matter for our future." The Madison who once wore mismatched socks because life's too short for boring feet was vanishing before my eyes, replaced by someone increasingly concerned with appearances and status. Even our bridal party meetings changed. Initially, Madison had chosen her 2 college roommates along with me as her bridesmaids. Then Bethany was added to the group. Shortly after, 2 of Derek's cousins joined as well. What hurt most was the growing frequency of cancelled sister brunches. Our monthly tradition of meeting halfway between Boston and New York for brunch and shopping had been sacred, even during our busiest periods. Now they were regularly rescheduled or shortened due to last-minute plans with Bethany or events with Derek's family. "Rain check on tomorrow?" Madison texted one Friday evening, hours before I was set to board a train to meet her. "Bethany scored us tickets to the Hamilton Benefit Gala. Derek thinks it's important we attend. So sorry. We'll make it up to you." I responded with understanding, but the pit in my stomach grew deeper. I began noticing I was being tagged in fewer wedding planning photos on social media, despite still officially being the maid of honor. When Madison ordered team bride robes for a wedding planning weekend, I discovered mine through an Instagram story where Bethany was holding it up with a caption about MOH duties. Still, I dismissed my worries. Planning a wedding is stressful, I reasoned, especially with the expectations of a wealthy future family to consider. Madison was just trying to navigate her new social world. Our sisterhood was unshakable, it always had been. Then came the text that would mark the beginning of the end: "Can we grab coffee tomorrow? Need to talk about the wedding. Important. Just you and me." The seriousness of her tone sent a chill through me, but I still couldn't imagine what was coming. I responded with a cheerful "of course. Our usual spot at 11, and received only a thumbs up in return. That night, I lay awake wondering what important wedding detail needed discussing, never suspecting that by this time tomorrow, everything would change. The coffee shop Madison chose was not our usual cozy spot but an upscale establishment in the financial district where lattes cost nearly $20 and came with gold leaf on the foam. I arrived early, claiming a table by the window and ordering Madison's favorite, a vanilla latte with an extra shot. The familiar gesture felt important, like holding on to something solid while everything else seemed to be shifting. When Madison walked in, I barely recognized her. Her naturally wavy hair had been straightened into a sleek bob, and her usual vibrant colors replaced by a beige designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked beautiful but different, polished in a way that erased her natural sparkle. "Sam," she said, air-kissing my cheek instead of our usual bear hug. "Thanks for making time." "For you?" "Always," I replied, pushing her latte toward her. Madison sat but didn't touch the drink. Her manicured fingers tapped nervously on the table, and she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. Something cold settled in my stomach. "So," she finally began, her voice unnaturally high, "the wedding planning is going well. Derek's mother has been amazing, really taking charge with the vendors. Did I tell you she convinced Raphael to do the flowers? He usually only works with Met Gala celebrities." "That's great," I said, confused about why this required a special meeting. Madison took a deep breath. "The thing is, the wedding has evolved into something bigger than we initially planned. It's becoming a rather high-profile event. Derek's family has connections to several society magazines that want to feature it." I nodded, still not understanding where this was going. "That sounds exciting." "It is. But it also means there are certain expectations to meet." She finally looked up at me, her expression a mixture of guilt and resolution. "Derek's family has very specific ideas about how everything should look. The wedding party needs to be balanced a certain way." The cold feeling spread from my stomach to my chest. "Madison, what are you trying to say?" She reached across the table, not quite touching my hand but hovering above it. "I need to make some adjustments to the wedding party. For symmetry and other considerations." "Symmetry," I repeated flatly. "Yes. And," she hesitated before continuing, words suddenly rushing out, "I need to ask you to step down as maid of honor. Bethany will be taking that role." The coffee shop seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "Bethany? You're replacing me with someone you've known for what, 6 months?" Madison winced at the hurt in my voice but pressed on. "Bethany has connections that are valuable for the wedding publications. She knows exactly how to stage everything for maximum coverage, and her father plays golf with the editor of Vogue." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So this is about social media and magazine spreads?" "Madison, we've been planning to be each other's maids of honor since we were kids playing with bedsheet veils." "I know, and I feel terrible, but this isn't just about us anymore. It's about building relationships that will benefit Derek's career and our future together." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "What about the relationship we've built over 30 years as sisters?" "You're still in the bridal party," Madison said quickly, as though offering a consolation prize. "You'll be a bridesmaid. It's still an important role." "A demotion," I translated. From sister to supporting cast. Sam, please try to understand. The wedding party needs to have a certain aesthetic for the photographs. Bethany has the connections and the look that. The look? I interrupted, my voice cracking. What's wrong with how I look? Madison flushed, realizing her mistake. Nothing. That came out wrong. I just meant that Bethany knows the photographers and stylists personally. It makes sense logistically. I sat back in my chair, suddenly remembering all the childhood moments, all the promises. Remember when we were kids, and you said I'd always be by your side when you got married? You pinky promised, Maddie. Her childhood nickname felt foreign on my tongue now, as though I was addressing a stranger wearing my sister's face. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the old Madison in her eyes, a flash of recognition and regret, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. We were children, Samantha. This is real life, with real considerations. Real considerations like magazine spreads and Instagram aesthetics? That's not fair, she said, straightening her posture. This wedding is important for Derek's family connections and our social standing. These are people who can open doors for both of us. I laughed hollowly. I don't need doors opened by people who think your sister isn't good enough to stand next to you. It's not like that, Madison insisted, but her eyes told a different story. She believed it was exactly like that, and she'd accepted it. Look, you're still a bridesmaid. You're still important. Just not as important as Bethany's Vogue connections, I said, standing up. The latte I'd bought her sat untouched between us, a small rejection that somehow symbolized everything. I have to go. Sam, please, Madison reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Congratulations on your high society wedding, Madison. I hope the photos turn out perfect. I walked out of the coffee shop with my head high, determined not to break down in public. It wasn't until I was alone in my car that I allowed the tears to fall, mourning not just my lost role in the wedding, but the sister who seemed to have disappeared somewhere beneath designer clothes and social ambitions. For the next few weeks, I tried to accept my new reality as just a bridesmaid. I told myself that being part of Madison's day in any capacity was better than nothing. I repeated mantras about putting her happiness first and supporting her choices, even when they hurt. I almost convinced myself I was okay with it. Then the texts started coming. Hair color question: would you consider going back to your natural color for the wedding? The red might clash with our color palette. Derek's mom's stylist recommended this skin treatment for all bridesmaids. Link attached. 6 sessions recommended before the wedding. Can you send your current measurements? The dress designer needs them ASAP. Also, are you still doing that fitness challenge? Just checking. Each message felt like another little cut. The Madison I knew would never have cared if my hair clashed with her color palette. She would have said the palette could adjust to me, not the other way around. But I bit my tongue and replied with forced cheerfulness. I even scheduled an appointment about the skin treatments, wincing at the cost that would eat into my savings. The final bridesmaid dresses were nothing like the midnight blue gown I'd originally selected. Instead, they were pale pink column dresses that did nothing for my complexion or figure. When I expressed concern during the virtual fitting, Madison's response was clipped. The pink photographs better for winter light. Bethany consulted with the wedding photographer. Of course she did. Then came the bachelorette party changes. Originally, we'd planned a weekend in Napa Valley, a meaningful choice because Madison and I had once promised to tour wine country together when we both turned 30. I'd been quietly arranging special touches, a private tasting at her favorite winery, a hot air balloon ride at dawn, personalized photo albums for each attendee filled with memories with the bride. 2 months before the wedding, Bethany sent out new bachelorette party invitations to the bridal party group chat. Ladies! So excited to announce the official Madison pre-wedding celebration. We'll be chartering a yacht in the Hamptons for a weekend of luxury, sponsored by Azure Vodka, thanks to my connections with their marketing team. See attached for your expected contribution. Can't wait to celebrate our gorgeous bride. The expected contribution was more than my monthly rent. The dates conflicted with a major work deadline I'd already mentioned to Madison. None of my planned personal touches were included. When I called Madison to discuss, she seemed distracted. I know it's different from what we planned, but Bethany pulled so many strings for this. The Azure sponsorship means we get professional photographers and social media coverage. It's going to be amazing. But what about Napa? That was our special plan. We can still do Napa someday, she said dismissively. This opportunity is too good to pass up. I dipped into my savings and rearranged my work schedule, determined to be there despite everything. The yacht weekend was exactly as I'd feared, a parade of Instagram moments with little genuine celebration. Madison spent most of the time posing for photos with Bethany and her new friends while I tried to find my place among women who viewed me with barely concealed pity or disinterest. The lowest moment came on the second night. I'd stepped away to call my office about the project I was missing, finding a quiet corner on the lower deck. As I was hanging up, I heard voices from the other side of the partition. I don't know why she even kept her in the bridal party, Bethany's unmistakable voice carried through the evening air. The photos would be so much more cohesive without her. I know, Madison replied, her voice slightly slurred from champagne. But she's my sister. I couldn't just cut her completely. At least we fixed the maid of honor situation. Could you imagine her giving a speech? Were those red highlights in all the close-up shots? They both laughed, and I felt something inside me crack. The Madison I knew would have defended me fiercely against anyone who spoke about me that way. Now she was joining in. I slipped away before they could realize I'd overheard, spending the rest of the night in my cabin claiming a migraine. Madison didn't check on me once. When I returned to Boston after the bachelorette weekend, an email from Madison was waiting in my inbox with the subject line "Updated wedding information." I opened it expecting schedule changes or rehearsal details. Instead, I found a carefully worded message explaining that due to venue restrictions and aesthetic considerations, they needed to balance the wedding party numbers and therefore I was being removed from the bridesmaid lineup altogether. We hope you understand this difficult decision, the email concluded. Your support as a cherished guest will mean the world to us on our special day. A cherished guest. After 30 years as sisters and months of planning, I'd been reduced to a generic guest at my own sister's wedding. I read the email again and again, searching for any trace of the Madison I knew. There was none. Just formal language that sounded like it had been drafted by a wedding planner or, more likely, Bethany. I curled up on my apartment floor, clutching my phone as tears streamed down my face. The sister who had once driven through a snowstorm to bring me ice cream after a breakup couldn't even call to tell me I was being cut from her wedding. The final line of the email kept flashing behind my closed eyelids. We trust you'll support our vision for a perfect day. Their vision. Their perfect day. There was no room for imperfect, ordinary me. For 3 days after receiving the email, I existed in a fog of disbelief and hurt. I called Madison repeatedly, but each call went straight to voicemail. I left messages ranging from confused to tearful to angry, none of which received a response. On the 4th day, my phone finally lit up with Madison's name. My hand shook as I answered. Madison, what is going on? I've been trying to reach you for days. I've been busy with wedding details, she replied, her voice cool and detached. I assumed you got my email explaining the situation. An email? I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. You kicked me out of your wedding with an email, Madison. After 30 years of being sisters. She sighed, the sound crackling through the connection. I knew you'd be emotional about this. That's why I thought writing would be better. Emotional? Of course I'm emotional. You promised me I'd be your maid of honor since we were children. Then you demoted me to bridesmaid. Now I'm just a guest? What happened to you? I've grown up, Samantha. This wedding isn't about childhood games. It's about my future with Derek, about making the right impressions on people who matter. The casual cruelty of her words left me breathless. And I don't matter? That's not what I said, Madison replied, her tone tinged with annoyance. But you're being difficult about everything. The hair color, the fitness expectations, the skin treatments. Everyone else is making an effort. An effort to be someone they're not, I shot back. You used to love my red highlights. You're the one who encouraged me to diet in the first place. Well, things change. People grow. You still have an invitation as a regular guest, Samantha. Be grateful for that. Be grateful. As though being allowed to witness my sister's wedding was some kind of generous concession. Something inside me snapped. The Madison I knew would never treat anyone this way, least of all me. What happened to the right people stay? What happened to sisters forever? Don't be so dramatic, she scoffed. It's one day. It's not about the day. It's about you becoming someone I don't even recognize anymore. Someone who values magazine spreads over the people who've loved you your whole life. If you can't be happy for me without making everything about yourself, then maybe. Maybe what? I challenged when she didn't continue. Maybe it's better if you don't come to the wedding at all. The words hung between us, a line crossed that could never be uncrossed. In that moment, I saw with painful clarity that I'd already lost my sister, long before this phone call. If that's what you want, I said quietly. It's not what I want, Madison replied, her voice softening slightly. But I need people around me who support my choices without judgment, who understand the world Derek and I are building. Even if those choices hurt people who love you? You're choosing to be hurt, Samantha. This isn't about you. We ended the call shortly after, nothing resolved, the distance between us wider than ever. I spent the night cycling through grief, rage, and disbelief, waiting for Madison to come to her senses and call back. She didn't. Instead, the next morning brought another email, this one even more formal than the last. Dear Samantha, after careful consideration, we have decided it would be best if you did not attend the wedding celebration. Your emotional response to the necessary changes in our plans suggests your presence might disrupt the harmonious atmosphere we are cultivating for our special day. We hope you can use this time for reflection and growth. Sincerely, Madison and Derek. Uninvited. Formally uninvited from my own sister's wedding, labeled a potential disruption to their harmonious atmosphere. The carefully worded rejection read like a corporate dismissal rather than a message from the person who had once been my closest confidant. I called my parents in tears, only to discover they already knew. Madison explained the situation, my mother said cautiously. She's under a lot of pressure with Derek's family, sweetie. Maybe it's better to give her space right now. Even they were taking her side. I felt completely alone, cast aside by the people I thought would always be my safe harbor. That night, unable to sleep and scrolling mindlessly through old photos, I stumbled across an album from my college study abroad in Florence. There I was, 6 years younger, standing on the Ponte Vecchio at sunset, looking happier and more carefree than I'd felt in months. I remembered that semester vividly, how scared I'd been to go alone, and how transformative those months had become. It was the first time I'd truly discovered myself outside of being someone's daughter or sister. A wild, impulsive thought took root. Madison's wedding was still 3 weeks away. I had 2 weeks of vacation time saved up. I'd been putting aside money to cover wedding expenses, bridesmaid dress, bachelorette party, wedding gift, none of which I'd need now. Before I could second-guess myself, I opened my laptop and searched for flights to Florence. There was a reasonably priced ticket leaving in 4 days. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as doubts crept in. Was I being petty? Would this just make things worse? Was I running away instead of facing problems? Then I remembered Madison's words, your emotional response suggests your presence might disrupt the harmonious atmosphere. If being myself, with my red highlighted hair and my genuine emotions, was disruptive to Madison's new world, then perhaps I needed to be somewhere else entirely. Somewhere I could remember who I was before all this. I clicked confirm booking, watching through tears as my credit card was charged and the confirmation email arrived in my inbox. I had no itinerary, no real plan beyond escaping the pain of rejection. I didn't know if I was making a huge mistake or the best decision of my life. All I knew was that on what would have been Madison's wedding day, I would be in Italy instead of crying alone in my apartment. And somehow, that felt like the first step toward healing. The flight to Florence was a blur of fitful sleep and anxious thoughts. Had I made a terrible mistake? Was I being childish by running away? Shouldn't I be trying to reconcile with Madison instead of fleeing to another continent? By the time the plane touched down at Florence Airport, I was exhausted and second-guessing every decision. The taxi ride to my hotel did little to lift my spirits. Even the golden Tuscan sunshine filtering through the window couldn't penetrate the cloud of hurt surrounding me. I'd booked a small hotel in the historic center, the kind of charming, family-run place that ordinarily would have delighted me. But as I checked in and was shown to my room, I felt only a dull emptiness. The room was lovely, exposed wooden beams, a wrought iron bed frame, and tall windows opening onto a narrow street lined with Renaissance-era buildings. It should have been magical. Instead, I dropped my suitcase, fell onto the bed, and finally gave in to the tears I'd been fighting since leaving Boston. I cried for the sister I'd lost, for the bond that seemed irreparably broken, and for finding myself alone in a beautiful city with no one to share it with. Eventually, exhausted, I fell into a deep sleep. I woke to early evening light and the sounds of life drifting up from the street below, conversations in rapid Italian, the clatter of dishes from nearby restaurants, distant church bells. Mechanically, I washed my face, changed clothes, and ventured out, not because I felt any desire to explore but because staying in the room with my thoughts seemed unbearable. I wandered aimlessly through Florence's narrow streets, barely registering the magnificent architecture and art surrounding me. Couples strolled hand in hand, families shared gelato, friends laughed over aperitivos, everyone seemed connected to someone while I drifted alone, occasionally wiping away tears that refused to stop coming. As dusk fell, I found myself in front of a small boutique with a window display of handmade leather journals. Something about their craftsmanship caught my attention, the first thing to break through my fog of misery all day. As I stood there, a woman appeared in the doorway. "Ti piacciono?" she asked, gesturing to the journals. When I looked confused, she switched to English. "You like them? Each one is unique, like the person who will write in it." "They're beautiful," I managed, my voice hoarse from crying. The woman studied me with kind eyes. "But you are sad. Not enjoying our beautiful Florence?" Something about her genuine concern broke through my defenses. "It's not Florence. Florence is lovely. I'm just going through something personal." She nodded as though this made perfect sense. "I am Lucia. This is my shop. Come inside, please." I followed her, not sure why I was accepting an invitation from a stranger when all I wanted was to be alone. The shop was warm and smelled of leather and beeswax. Lucia gestured for me to sit on a small stool while she prepared tiny cups of espresso from a machine behind the counter. "In Italy, we do not drink our sorrows alone," she explained, handing me a cup. "Now, tell Lucia why an American girl cries in the most beautiful city in the world." Perhaps it was her grandmotherly manner or simply the relief of finding kindness after days of rejection, but I found myself telling this stranger everything. The childhood promise, the gradual changes in Madison, the series of rejections culminating in my uninvitation, and my impulsive flight to Italy. Lucia listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of disapproval at particularly hurtful moments in the story. When I finished, she patted my hand. "So you run away to cry alone in Italy instead of crying alone in Boston. This is not a solution, Cara." Her bluntness startled a laugh out of me, the first genuine laugh in weeks. "You're right. I didn't really think it through. But maybe it is still fate," Lucia continued. "Tonight, my family hosts dinner on our rooftop. Good food, good wine, good people. You will come." It wasn't a question, and somehow I found myself nodding. "I don't want to impose." "Nonsense. In Italy, strangers are just family you haven't met yet. Be at this address at 8. She scribbled on a piece of paper and pressed it into my hand. No more wandering alone with sad eyes. At 8 o'clock, feeling slightly ridiculous but desperately needing human connection, I found myself climbing the stairs to a rooftop terrace in a centuries-old building near the Duomo. The scene that greeted me was straight from a movie, strings of lights glowing against the darkening sky, a long table set with mismatched plates and wine glasses, and about a dozen people of various ages talking animatedly in a mix of Italian and English. Lucia spotted me hovering uncertainly at the top of the stairs and immediately swept me into the gathering. Everyone. This is Samantha from America. She is our special guest tonight. Rather than the awkward reception I expected, I was met with warm smiles, enthusiastic handshakes, and rapid-fire introductions I had no hope of keeping straight. A glass of wine was pressed into my hand, and I was seated between Lucia and a man in his early 30s who introduced himself as Alessandro, Lucia's nephew. "My aunt told me you're having a difficult time," he said in perfect English. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Your aunt works fast," I replied, feeling a blush rise to my cheeks. Alessandro laughed. "Lucia believes there's no problem that can't be solved with good food, good wine, and good company. She's usually right." As the evening progressed, I found myself drawn into conversations, laughter, and shared dishes of homemade pasta, roasted vegetables, and tiramisu that put any restaurant version to shame. Alessandro, who worked as an art history professor at the local university, kept me engaged with stories about Florence's hidden gems and the lesser-known histories behind famous landmarks. By the time we reached our second bottle of wine, I realized with surprise that I hadn't thought about Madison or the wedding for at least an hour. When I mentioned this to Alessandro, he raised his glass in a toast. "Your first genuine laugh in Florence. This calls for celebration." "It's the first time I've laughed in weeks," I admitted. "I can't believe I'm sitting on a rooftop in Italy with people I just met, feeling okay." "Sometimes we need to step completely out of our normal lives to find perspective," he said thoughtfully. "Or at least, that's what I tell my students when they're stressed about exams." As the dinner wound down and guests began to depart with kisses on both cheeks, Alessandro asked if I had plans for the following day. "Crying in various scenic locations?" I suggested with a self-deprecating smile. "I have a better idea," he countered. "Instead of a tour of sadness, what about a self-celebration tour?" "A what?" "A self-celebration tour. Instead of spending your time in Florence thinking about what you've lost, what if you spent it celebrating yourself? The sister who rejected you clearly doesn't appreciate who you are. So why not use this time to remember what makes you special?" The concept was so foreign to my current state of mind that I couldn't quite grasp it. "I'm not sure I know how to do that." "That's where I come in," Alessandro said with a grin. "Meet me at Piazza della Repubblica at 10 tomorrow. Wear comfortable shoes." The next morning, fueled by curiosity and the first good night's sleep I'd had in days, I arrived at the piazza to find Alessandro waiting with 2 cappuccinos and a small pastry box. "First rule of self-celebration, always start with something sweet," he explained, handing me both a coffee and a cornetto filled with chocolate cream. Over breakfast, Alessandro helped me plan what he dramatically termed my Renaissance, a week of experiences in Florence specifically designed to reconnect me with things I loved but had neglected while trying to fit into Madison's new world. When I mentioned I'd always wanted to learn to make pasta from scratch but never had time, Alessandro immediately added a cooking class to the itinerary. When I confessed my love of Renaissance art had been a source of teasing from Madison's new friends, who preferred contemporary installations, he scheduled private tours of lesser-known museums where we could linger without crowds. Most surprisingly, when I shyly admitted that I'd always wanted to wear something elegant and beautiful in Italy but felt self-conscious about my curves, Alessandro didn't hesitate. "Then we must find you the perfect dress. Something that makes you feel as beautiful as you are." That afternoon, he took me to a small boutique owned by a friend of his mother's. The elderly seamstress took one look at me and declared, "Ah, a real woman with real curves. Not these skinny mannequins they put in magazines." She disappeared into the back room and returned with a white sundress made of flowing linen with delicate embroidery along the neckline. It wasn't bridal white but a softer, creamier shade that complemented my skin tone perfectly. "Try," she insisted, shooing me toward a changing room. When I emerged, Alessandro's eyes widened appreciably, and the seamstress clapped her hands in delight. "Bellissima," she exclaimed. "This is how a dress should look, like it was made for your body, not like you are trying to become someone else for the dress." Looking in the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. The dress highlighted my curves instead of hiding them, and the color made my red highlighted hair look vibrant rather than out of place. For the first time in months, I didn't see the flaws Madison and Bethany had pointed out. I saw a woman who looked beautiful. Confidently herself. "We'll take it," Alessandro told the seamstress, ignoring my protests about the price. "Consider it a gift from Florence to apologize for your sister's poor judgment." That evening, wearing my new dress and with flowers Alessandro had bought from a street vendor tucked into my hair, I felt a strange new sensation bubbling up inside me, something like joy, or perhaps defiance. On impulse, I asked Alessandro to take my photo against the backdrop of the Arno River at sunset. I posed not with the careful, Instagram-worthy stance Madison and her friends had perfected, but laughing genuinely, arms spread wide as though embracing the city itself. When Alessandro showed me the result, tears sprung to my eyes, not from sadness but recognition. There was the Samantha I'd lost somewhere along the way, the one who found joy in small moments, who laughed without worrying how it looked, who embraced life messily and authentically. Without overthinking it, I posted the photo to Instagram with the caption, "Celebrating myself in Florence #MyItalianFairytale," and put my phone away, not expecting any particular response. Little did I know that this simple act of reclaiming my joy would be the first step in a journey that would reach far beyond my personal healing. The following morning, I woke to my phone buzzing incessantly with notifications. My single photo had garnered more likes overnight than anything I'd posted in years, along with dozens of comments from friends. "OMG, you're in Italy? What happened to the wedding? Girl, you look amazing. What's the story here? Wait, weren't you supposed to be at Madison's wedding? Spill the tea." Even colleagues I rarely spoke with outside of work were messaging me, curious about the sudden international adventure. Overwhelmed, I set my phone aside and tried to enjoy the breakfast brought to my room by the hotel staff. But curiosity eventually won out, and I found myself scrolling through the flood of messages. What struck me most was the genuine concern in many of the comments. People I hadn't spoken to in months were reaching out, sensing something significant had happened. After consideration, I decided honesty was the best approach. I crafted a longer post explaining the situation, not to villainize Madison, but to share my journey truthfully. I described the gradual changes, the series of rejections, and finally, the decision to celebrate myself in Italy rather than wallow in hurt at home. "Sometimes the people we love most change in ways we can't follow," I wrote. "And when that happens, we have a choice, to diminish ourselves trying to fit their new mold, or to remember who we are and honor that person instead." I chose the latter, and somehow found myself on this unexpected adventure. Here's to finding joy in the detours life throws our way. #MyItalianFairytale #self-celebration. I attached additional photos from my first days in Florence, including one of Lucia's family dinner, the cooking class where I'd made imperfect but delicious ravioli, and a shot of me laughing with chocolate gelato smeared accidentally on my nose. They weren't polished or filtered, just genuine moments of rediscovered joy. What happened next was entirely unexpected. By lunchtime, my post had been shared hundreds of times. By dinner, thousands. People I'd never met were commenting with their own stories of family estrangement, of choosing themselves after rejection, of finding unexpected joy in painful detours. "You inspired me to book the solo trip I've been putting off for years. I was uninvited from my best friend's wedding last year for similar reasons. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for showing that sometimes the path forward is about honoring yourself, not diminishing your light for others." Alessandro was as surprised as I was when I showed him my suddenly exploding social media presence during our planned visit to the Boboli Gardens. "You've struck a nerve," he observed. Many people have experienced rejection like this, but few talk about it openly. Fewer still respond by choosing joy instead of bitterness. I'm not sure I've chosen joy entirely, I admitted. I still feel hurt when I think about Madison. Of course. But you're not letting the hurt consume you. That's what people are responding to. The viral attention brought unexpected opportunities. A luxury villa outside Florence reached out through Instagram, offering a complimentary 3-night stay after the manager read my story. "We believe in celebrating yourself and would be honored to host you during this journey," their message read. A local boutique offered to loan me a gown for a photo shoot, saying my story had touched the owner. Alessandro connected me with his friend Matteo, a professional photographer who volunteered his services. "Let's create something beautiful," Matteo suggested during our first meeting. "Not for Instagram or to make anyone jealous, but to capture this moment of transformation. When you look back years from now, you'll remember not the rejection but the renaissance that followed." As these pieces fell into place, I realized they were converging toward a significant date. What would have been Madison's wedding day? The day I'd most dreaded spending alone was transforming into something else entirely, a celebration of my own. The morning of that day dawned clear and golden over Florence. Instead of waking up to check Madison's social media for wedding updates, I found myself at the luxury villa surrounded by a team of people determined to make the day special. A local makeup artist and hairstylist arrived early, both having read my story and offered their services. They enhanced my natural features rather than trying to transform me into someone else, even incorporating my red highlights into an elegant updo adorned with small, delicate flowers. The gown from the boutique was breathtaking, a flowing silk creation in deep emerald green that made my eyes shine and complemented my complexion perfectly. It wasn't a wedding dress but something uniquely suited to me, a celebration of my natural beauty rather than an attempt to conform to someone else's standards. As Matteo photographed me in the villa's gardens and the surrounding Tuscan countryside, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. Here I was, on what should have been one of the most painful days of my life, experiencing something completely unexpected, joy on my own terms. The villa staff, moved by my story, arranged a sunset dinner on the terrace overlooking rolling hills and vineyards. They'd enlisted local musicians to provide soft acoustic accompaniment and decorated the space with candles and flowers. Alessandro joined me as a friend and supporter, raising a toast to choosing yourself when others do not choose you. The photos Matteo captured that day were unlike anything I'd seen of myself before. There was a quiet confidence in my eyes, a genuine smile that reached beyond the camera. I looked happy. Not the carefully constructed happiness of post-social media photos, but the real, complex happiness that comes from weathering a storm and finding yourself stronger for it. That evening, I posted a single photo from the day with the caption, "Today I chose to celebrate love, self-love. Sometimes the best +1 is yourself." #MyItalianFairytale. The post exploded online. By midnight, it had been shared tens of thousands of times across multiple platforms. Overnight, my follower count jumped from a few hundred to over 50,000. Women's magazines reached out for interview requests. Travel blogs asked to feature my story. What resonated most with people, based on their comments, wasn't the beautiful setting or the gorgeous dress, it was the authentic joy radiating from my expression, the visible journey from heartbreak to self-acceptance. This is what healing looks like. I've never seen someone turn rejection into such a beautiful act of self-love. You're giving hope to everyone who's ever been made to feel not enough. As I fell asleep that night in the luxurious villa, surrounded by the remnants of a day filled with unexpected beauty and connection, I realized something profound had shifted within me. The pain of Madison's rejection hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something else, a catalyst for growth I never would have chosen but couldn't now regret. Somewhere across the ocean, Madison was presumably celebrating her first night as a married woman, surrounded by the carefully curated guests and aesthetics she'd chosen. Yet here I was, having created something beautiful and authentic from the ashes of that rejection, connecting with thousands of strangers in a way I never could have anticipated. For the first time since receiving that devastating email, I fell asleep feeling not like I'd lost something irreplaceable, but like I'd gained something unexpected and precious instead. I woke the next morning to even more notifications than before. My phone buzzed constantly with alerts from various platforms. Madison's wedding day had come and gone, but instead of spending it in tears as I'd feared, I'd created something meaningful that was now taking on a life of its own. Over breakfast on the villa's sunlit terrace, I discovered my story had been featured by several major online publications. Uninvited from sister's wedding, woman creates her own Italian fairy tale, read one headline. The ultimate self-love response to family rejection goes viral, proclaimed another. What touched me most were the personal messages flooding my inbox, stories from people who had experienced similar rejections from family members, friends, or partners. They thanked me for showing another way forward, for demonstrating that rejection didn't have to define you. I've been estranged from my brother for 3 years, wrote one woman. Your post gave me hope that there can be joy on the other side of family heartbreak. A video call request from my parents interrupted my scrolling. With trepidation, I accepted. Their faces appeared on screen, looking somewhat sheepish. Samantha, my father began, we've seen your posts. And the articles. I braced myself for disapproval or accusations of causing drama, but instead, my mother burst into tears. We're so sorry, honey. We should have supported you more. We got caught up in Madison's excitement and Derek's family's expectations and, we failed you. We thought we were keeping the peace, my father added, but we see now that we were just enabling behavior that hurt you deeply. Can you forgive us? The apology was unexpected but healing. We talked for nearly an hour about everything that had happened, about their own discomfort with some of Madison's changes, and about how they wanted to repair our relationship moving forward. We've actually been uncomfortable with many of Derek's family's expectations, my mother confessed. But we didn't want to risk Madison's happiness. We see now that we should have been braver in speaking up. As we ended the call with plans for them to visit me in Boston after my return, I felt another piece of my heart mending. The conversation reminded me that relationships are complex, with everyone making mistakes and hopefully learning from them. Later that afternoon, I received a text that made my heart stop momentarily. Madison. I saw your posts. And the articles. How could you humiliate me like this on my wedding weekend? You've turned my special moment into being all about you, as usual. I stared at the message, feeling old hurt threatening to resurface. But then I noticed something beneath the angry words, a hint of regret, perhaps even jealousy at the attention and support I was receiving. Madison had orchestrated her perfect wedding, yet here I was creating something authentic that resonated with thousands. After careful consideration, I replied, that wasn't my intention, Madison. I was simply finding my way through pain. I hope your wedding was everything you wanted it to be. Despite everything, I still love you and wish you happiness. It wasn't an apology, I had nothing to apologize for, but it was an olive branch. I wouldn't diminish my experience or the connections it had created, but I also wouldn't use this moment to inflict hurt in return. The next few days brought a whirlwind of opportunities. A travel company reached out about becoming their brand ambassador for solo female travel. Several women's magazines requested interviews about self-discovery and healing after rejection. A book publisher even inquired about a potential memoir. As my initial 2-week trip neared its end, I made an impulsive decision: I would extend my stay in Italy. The graphic design firm I worked for had been surprisingly supportive after seeing the viral story, offering me the chance to work remotely for an additional 2 weeks. Your creativity seems to be flourishing there, my boss wrote. We'd be fools not to support that. During these extended weeks, my friendship with Alessandro deepened. We never crossed the line into romance. Both of us recognized that I was in a period of significant personal transformation, but we developed a connection based on mutual respect and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. You're not the same woman who wandered into Lucia's shop that first night, he observed as we shared a bottle of wine on my last evening in Florence. You've reclaimed something important. I think I found the me I was before I started trying to be what others wanted, I agreed. I'd forgotten she existed. Upon returning home to Boston, I discovered my apartment felt different, smaller in some ways, but also more genuinely mine. I replaced the bland, neutral decor I'd chosen to match Madison's aesthetic with vibrant colors and patterns that brought me joy. I enrolled in Italian cooking classes and started a blog documenting my ongoing journey of self-discovery. Most significantly, I founded an online support community for people healing from family estrangement. What began as a small forum grew into thousands of members sharing resources, stories, and hope. The message was simple but powerful: family rejection is painful, but it doesn't have to be the end of your story. 6 months after Madison's wedding, I received an email from her. The subject line simply read "Talk?" The message inside was brief: "I miss my sister. The real one, not the one I tried to make you into. Can we meet?" Reading those words, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: hope, wariness, lingering hurt, but also a newfound strength. The Samantha of a year ago might have immediately jumped at the chance for reconciliation, perhaps even apologizing for things that weren't her fault. The Samantha who had celebrated herself in Italy approached it differently. I agreed to meet, but on my terms, at a neutral location, with clear boundaries about what I was and wasn't willing to discuss. I wasn't closing the door on our relationship, but I also wasn't abandoning the self-worth I'd fought hard to reclaim. Our first meeting was awkward, with both of us dancing around difficult topics. The second was more honest, with Madison admitting that her perfect wedding had felt strangely empty without me there. By our third coffee date, we were cautiously rebuilding a relationship, not the enmeshed bond of our childhood, but something new that respected our individual journeys and boundaries. I got lost in trying to be what Derek's family expected, Madison confessed during one of these conversations. I'm still figuring out how to be authentic within those expectations. That's your journey, I told her. Just as finding my voice after rejection was mine. As my Italian adventure faded from viral attention into cherished personal history, the lessons it taught me remained vibrant and alive. I learned that sometimes the people we love most cannot or will not grow alongside us, and that's painful but survivable. I discovered that rejection, while agonizing, can sometimes redirect us toward more authentic paths. Most importantly, I realized that celebrating yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary and healing, especially when others have made you feel unworthy of celebration. 1 year after my impromptu Italian escape, I returned to Florence, this time intentionally, with a journey planned not around running away from pain but embracing joy. Alessandro showed me parts of the city I hadn't seen before, and Lucia hosted another family dinner where I was welcomed like a returning relative. Standing once again on the Ponte Vecchio at sunset, I reflected on how drastically my life had changed in a year. The uninvitation that had once felt like the end of my world had instead become the beginning of a more authentic life. The viral attention had faded, but the connections and community it created remained, growing stronger with each person who found their way to healing through shared stories. The greatest lesson wasn't about going viral or even about standing up for yourself, though both had their place. It was about recognizing that our worth doesn't diminish when others fail to see it. That sometimes the most powerful response to rejection is not anger or revenge, but the quiet, determined act of choosing yourself, over and over again, until that choice becomes not just a reaction to hurt but a celebration of who you truly are. So to everyone watching this who's ever felt cast aside, diminished, or uninvited from spaces where you thought you belonged, your story doesn't end with rejection. It simply takes a turn you didn't expect, opening doors to rooms you never knew existed, filled with people who celebrate exactly who you are. If my story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment about your own journey of self-celebration, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding joy in life's unexpected detours. Thank you for being part of my Italian fairy tale, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful celebrations are the ones we create for ourselves.